Well, it may be fair, maybe not fair, but when you talk to investors, how you present your data matters because you often, in this highly distracted world, have seconds, not minutes, certainly not hours to grab someone's attention or don't. And so, Jake, you just wrote a fantastic article about raising funds and becoming a successful CPG founder. And I was really excited that our dialogue about the charts that we worked with early at Sputnik made it into that article. So tell us more. Like, what was this chart and what was special about it?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Oksana, thank you. I think you were part of it. You're a contributor to that article, obviously. But you co-created. But that journey was quite an interesting learning experience for me. So, I mean, for some of the viewers and the listeners, that they're listening right now. So, we are a food company essentially. Now, we sell food products. We're a consumer packaged goods company. And so, as a founder, one of the earliest lessons I had when approaching investors for capital was that I made the mistake of going first or leaning first with about the product, right? So I remember some of the earliest versions of her pitch deck. There were several slides about the product. This is a sauce. You add it to protein and veggies, and it's Filipino recipes, and voila. And I think the tricky thing, and I'm sure Oksana can agree, is that investors, they get a lot of inbounds, as you can imagine. They get a lot of inbounds from crazy founders like me, right? Everything from I don't know, AI apps to Filipino sauces, and so it's like, so the lesson for me was like, oh, they're getting like thousands of inbounds. How do I cut through the clutter? And then is like, I need to find a way to really grab their attention in the first few seconds of viewing, the same way that we grab consumers' attention in the first few seconds when they enter the grocery store. And so I remember, I had all this great data and I had all these great insights. And then so I remember going to Joe and Oksana. It's like, hey, this is my pitch deck. And then, I need some help because I feel like I'm not really capturing the full opportunity of Fila Manila. And I wanted to get a lot of their expertise. And I remember sitting down with Oksana, and I know that Oksana worked for really amazing, consulting groups before. So I used to joke it was like a free billable hour. But basically, it was like, Oksana, help me. And then, so we sat down together. We looked at all the data, and then it's like, how do we distill a lot of this great data that you have into a single, easy to read chart, right? And so I remember the key insight that we got was talking about the size of the Filipino American population, right? And then we also talked about the representation of said population in US grocery stores in terms of brand representation in the category. And that was the biggest kind of opportunity because there's a huge population of Filipino Americans. And at the same time, there's almost zero representation of the brand and sorry the of the cuisine in most grocery stores. And then we have to make that correlation. Like, whoa, huge opportunity, zero representation. And then that's how we kind of came together. Is like we need to make a chart that shows these two interesting insights in a simple, easy to read form. And that became kind of like our power chart.
And I think like I'm a huge one. Like one of the things that they really teach you at McKinsey to really think about how you present the data. And I think that carries through not just the charts, but the bullet points and the words, because now more than ever, everyone's attention is drawn all over the place. And honestly, the chart is quite basic, but you would be surprised how often it really conveys the point. People don't invest in this enough. And the chart is basically, like the equal size bar charts where you're gonna go and say this is the chunks of the population, and here we have like Indian, Filipino, Chinese, and other Asian minorities represented, and they are like Filipino is the second biggest, and I think roughly in equal chunks, more or less. And here we have the percentage of packaged food represented in every grocery stores, and we're gonna have this Filipino collapse to this tiny little sliver, almost non-existent. And I think that fact is shocking, and that fact likely will lead any reasonable business person to believe that there is opportunity to expand that, because maybe it will not be as big as the Chinese or Indian, which have been we have a lot of familiarity, but it certainly does not deserve to have that tiny little sliver there. And what you do with that insight and that one clear chart is you collapse pages of data and bullets and words into like, oh wow, I haven't thought about it this way. And now you get an opportunity to talk about the second chart. How you pick your words, how you pick your slides, that really matters, and it shows respect to someone who reads this. Practically, and we're going to link to the footnotes, fantastic book. It's oldie but goodie by this fantastic guy, Gene Zelesny, and it says say it with with charts. It's still on my bookshelf, and I recommend it to most founders because you do not often need a lot of bells and whistles, but you have to have a clarity of thought. What is it you're saying? Why this would matter to the person on the other side? And that takes time. Like, it actually is often a lot longer to give two or three great slides compared to 30 meh, so so.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to add as well, too, to Oksana's point, where if you think about getting these your message and your opportunity across to investors, if you think about the first email, think about the first presentation. As founders, we have to remind ourselves, what is the objective of this particular presentation or this very first communication with an investor, right? Is it to get a check from them on the very first meeting? Absolutely not. It's never going to happen, right? It's like asking someone on a first date and proposing to them on the first date, right? I think the objective of that very first cold email is to get their attention to get to that second meeting or that second call. And what Oksana was mentioning is like, talking about the opportunity in these very clear, very powerful and impactful data points, like a chart or a few words or example, is exactly how you do it. So, since we created this chart together, I remember using in for cold emails or introduction emails to investors, I would actually just copy and paste that chart into the email. Like, hey, we're Fila Manila. Our vision is to represent the next generation Filipino American cuisine. Here's a chart that shows you the opportunity. Do you want to do a call? And then I was surprised, like from that email versus what I did in the past with like one or two or three paragraphs and like here's the link to the deck. The response rate almost tripled. Because it's easy to understand. Like investors read the charts, like, oh, this is a big opportunity. I'm very curious. Like, what is he trying to sell here? And then that gets you the door open into the next step of the conversation, which is exactly what you want to do as a founder.